Hello, thank you for listening. My name is Heinrich Richter, and I want to tell you a story from a time when I was just 25 years old. Before the war, before all of it, my world was the Black Forest. It smelled of damp earth and pine needles after a rain. It tasted of cool, clean water from a stream. My life was measured in the quiet patience of the hunt. I was a hunter, you see, a trapper. I understood the world as a place of cycles, of predator and prey, of life and the honorable death that feeds it. Every snapped twig was a word, every track in the mud a sentence. The forest spoke a language, and I was fluent. I believed that if you were silent enough and watched long enough, the world would show you its secrets. The army found this skill useful. They taught me to hunt the most dangerous animal of all. But the war on the endless, flat emptiness of the steppe, the war taught me a new language. It was a language of pure noise, and its only secret was that everything, eventually, breaks. People wonder how a man endures a retreat. They think of grand strategies, of maps and generals. They don't understand. For the soldier on the ground, a retreat isn't a strategy. It's a dissolution. It's the world coming apart behind you and the horizon in front of you offering nothing but more emptiness. And for me, on a cold autumn day in '43, clinging to the western bank of the Dnieper, it began not with a grand battle, but with a quiet, impossible order. The air was a cold, wet cloth pressed to the face. It carried the stench of the east, a unique perfume of diesel fumes, churned mud, and something metallic and sweet that you learned too quickly was blood. We were ghosts already, the remnants of the fifth fuel, skeletons rattling inside mud-caked uniforms. The grand summer offensive at Kursk, the one that was supposed to break them, had broken us instead. Now we were no longer the hammer. We were the nail being driven back and back and back across the plains we had crossed so arrogantly 2 years before. The Dnieper was behind us, a wide, gray, unforgiving barrier. The last of the engineers were preparing the bridge for demolition. My lieutenant, a boy from Berlin with eyes too old for his face, found me huddled behind the shattered carcass of a Panzer IV. Its turret was blown clean off, a steel skull gaping at the colorless sky. "Richter," he said, his voice a dry rasp, "we need a ghost." I just looked at him, my Mauser resting across my knees. A ghost, that's what they called me. In the forests of France, in the partisan-hunted woods of Belarus, I could disappear. I was the man they sent to see without being seen. But here, in this billiard table of shell-pocked earth, there was nowhere to hide. The land itself was your enemy. It offered no cover, no comfort. It was a flat, open grave. "The southern flank," he continued, pointing with a trembling hand toward a slight rise in the terrain, a pathetic wrinkle in the landscape dominated by a skeletal copse of birch trees. "The Ivans will probe there before they try a crossing. We need to make them think we're still here in strength. We need you to buy us time." He didn't need to say the rest. Buy time for the rest of the unit to get across the river. Buy time with my life. He handed me 2 extra bandoliers of ammunition and a canvas bag with 3 stick grenades. A king's ransom. "Hold until you can't anymore," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Then good luck, Richter." He was gone, swallowed by the gray mist, leaving me alone with the wind. The hunter was being left as bait for the pack. I crawled my way to the position. It wasn't a trench, not really. Just a long, deep shell crater, half filled with brackish water. The lip of the crater gave me a commanding view of the approach, a gently sloping field of mud and dead sunflowers, their heads bowed as if in mourning. I settled in, my back against the cold, damp earth. The hunter's instinct took over. The fear receded, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. This was my stand. This was my forest now. I surveyed the terrain, memorizing it. A crippled T-34 listing to one side like a beached whale. A cluster of splintered fence posts. A dark patch of churned earth that was probably a mass grave. I read the landscape not for tracks, but for firing lanes. Not for game trails, but for killing grounds. The wind whispered through the dead sunflowers, a dry, rattling sound. For a moment, a sensory ghost appeared. It was the sound of the wind in the firs of the Schwarzwald, a sound of home, of peace. The dissonance was so sharp, so violent, it felt like a physical blow. I shook my head, clearing it. Home was a memory. This was reality. Hours passed. The world was shades of gray and brown. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't the peaceful silence of my forest. It was a heavy, pregnant silence waiting to burst. My fear returned not as a sharp panic, but as a slow, cold dread. The fear of the trapped animal, of being cornered. Of the horizon suddenly filling with an unstoppable wave of brown greatcoats, a human tide to drown my single rifle. Then I saw them. At first, just movement, a flicker at the edge of my vision. A hunter learns to trust that flicker. They were good, 3 of them moving low, using the dead ground. They flowed over the earth, not like soldiers, but like wolves testing a scent on the wind. My heart didn't race. It settled into a slow, heavy rhythm. The predator recognizes its prey. I raised the Mauser, its wooden stock feeling like a part of my own arm. The first man paused by the crippled tank, raising his binoculars. He was the leader. Always take the leader. The crosshairs of my scope settled on the center of his chest. I let out half a breath and held it. The forest taught me this patience. The world narrowed to the space between my eye and the sight. The wind, the cold, my own life, it all fell away. There was only the target and the stillness before the shot. Breath in, hold, squeeze. The rifle kicked against my shoulder, the crack of the shot shockingly loud in the silence. The man by the tank crumpled, a puppet with its strings cut. The other two instantly dropped, disappearing into the mud. I worked the bolt, the smooth, mechanical asterisk, schlick-schlack, asterisk, a deeply comforting sound. I was no longer Heinrich Richter, the boy from Freiburg. I was a function, a tool designed for this single purpose. Another hour of waiting. They would be more cautious now. They knew a sniper was here. They didn't know it was only one. My deception was working. Then a new movement from the left by the splintered fence posts. A single man crawling on his belly. He was trying to flank me. He was clever. But the forest teaches you to see not just what is in front of you, but the entire picture. I waited. Let him think he was unseen. Let him get comfortable. He rose to a knee behind a small mound of earth. That was his mistake. It was only for a second. It was enough. The Mauser barked again. Another ghost sent back to the earth. This went on for what felt like an eternity, a deadly game of patience. They sent probes 2 or 3 at a time. I let them come close, then dispatched them with the cold economy of a man who knows each bullet is a grain of sand in his hourglass. 4, 5, 6. I wasn't counting men anymore. I was counting cartridges. My movements became automatic. Fire, work the bolt, scan, breathe, fire, the hunter at his work. My mind was a cold, clear void. My thoughts weren't thoughts at all, just calculations of wind and distance. But the tide was rising. I could feel it. The probes became more frequent, more aggressive. A machine gun opened up from somewhere to my right, stitching a line of angry holes in the earth above my head, showering me with dirt. They were zeroing in on me. The trap was closing. My ammunition was terrifyingly low. 1 bandolier left. The lieutenant's words echoed, "Hold until you can't anymore." I was there. It was time to become a ghost for real. I began to plan my retreat, a fighting withdrawal, crawling from crater to crater back towards the river. I shifted my body, pushing myself up from the mud-caked floor of my crater. As my hand pressed against the earthen wall for leverage, something brushed against my fingers. It was soft, delicate. I looked down. There, tucked into a tiny, miraculous hollow in the crater wall, sheltered from the rain and the shrapnel and the madness, was a bird's nest. It was small, perfectly woven from dried grass, mud, and bits of string. And inside, nestled in the delicate cup, were 3 pale blue eggs speckled with brown. They were whole, undisturbed, perfect, and the world stopped. The shooting, the fear, the cold, it all vanished. My mind, which for hours had been a cold, killing instrument, simply broke. My thoughts were stripped gears, grinding uselessly. A bird's nest, here. A bird had seen this hellscape, this monument to man's insanity, and decided, this is a good place to build a home. This is a good place to bring new life. I stared at it, my breath caught in my throat. I could see the individual blades of grass, the care with which they were woven. It was the most beautiful and the most insane thing I had ever seen. It was an act of hope so profound, so utterly at odds with my reality, that it felt like a judgment. All day I had been an agent of death, a thing of steel and cold calculation. And here was life, fragile and insistent, in a form I hadn't considered in years. It was a piece of the world I came from. A piece of the black forest, of order, of nature, sitting in the middle of this man-made apocalypse. That nest did what no Soviet bullet could. It shattered my purpose. The hunter's trance was broken. I was no longer a function. I was Heinrich Richter again, a boy from a forest village, and I was looking at something that had no place in my world. The bodies in the field, the smell of cordite, the weight of the rifle in my hands, it all became grotesque, obscene. I looked at the eggs, then I looked out over the field of dead men, predator and prey. But this was not the honorable cycle I knew. This was just waste. Slowly, carefully, I pulled my hand back. I gathered my few remaining rounds and began to crawl away, leaving the nest undisturbed. I didn't run. I moved with a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone, replaced by a vast, hollow sadness. I had held my position. I had done my duty, but that tiny, defiant nest had conquered me. I spent the rest of my life working with my hands in the quiet of the woods. I never hunted again. I couldn't. Before the war, I believed the hunt was an honest thing. A clean, natural cycle. You honored the animal you took. But war taught me that man is the only creature that has perverted the hunt into an act of desecration. That day, I wasn't a hunter. I was a monster, and it took a tiny bird to show me the difference. I never again believed that everything had its place or that the world made sense. I saw with my own eyes that some things, some fragile, beautiful things, exist where they have no right to, and that some things, some terrible, efficient things, do their work in places they should never be. The hardest lesson is this. In war, you are not asked to choose between good and evil. You are asked to choose what part of your own soul you are willing to destroy to survive the day. And you spend the rest of your life listening to its ghost. This memory is a piece of shrapnel I carry. It's heavy. Help me carry it. Subscribe and ensure these stories are never left to rust in silence.